Please join me in welcoming Detola Amore. But before then, I'm just going to give you a profile of Detola. She comes really, really highly recommended. And it's a privilege to have her on this program tonight, because I follow her on LinkedIn and I see all the great work that she does and she continues to do. And also, it's the second time I'm actually having the privilege of sharing platforms with Detola. Before we came on today, we were joking about the fact that about 10 years ago, almost 10 years now, I interviewed on the Kent Christian radio show. At the time, I used to run a radio. You can see I've had quite a number of interesting parts in my career. I used to be a radio show host, and at the time, Detola was one of our guests at the time. So Detola Amore is the CEO of the Productive Company, and she's also a certified Maxwell leadership coach. She's a certified Maxwell DISC behavioral trainer. She's an Amazon best-selling author and also an international speaker. So you can see that she is eminently qualified. She's also a certified grief and loss specialist with a wealth of experience assisting individuals from diverse backgrounds with grief. So with a lot of excitement, please join me with hand claps and emojis of excitement to welcome to the platform tonight, Mrs. Detola Amore. The floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Let me know. Thumbs up.
Yes, we
Or
can.
nods.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. T, for this opportunity to come share with your platform. I don't take it for granted at all. Thank you so much. And it's really great to see people from all over the world, from Nigeria, from the UK. I think I saw someone from Sierra Leone, or, different places. It's really good to have us all in this room to talk about this very important topic. So without any further ado, I'll just share my slides. I'm hoping that today will be interactive. So please feel free to use the chat box to put in your questions, to put in your comments. I'm sure, I won't be looking so much at the chat so I don't get distracted. But I think we have people on hand to help us with that. Okay, so let's get started. So my name is Detola Amore, there's something going on with my Zoom. Okay.
Good. Yeah. So we can see the full screen now.
Is it full? Okay,
yeah,
you can see
yeah,
the full screen now.
see, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Now I need my notes. Oh gosh. I don't know what has happened to my notes. It's appeared. And the whole point of us joining early was to make sure everything was working fine.
Yeah.
Now it's suddenly gone. Why on me?
Never mind. But by the time we get the show running, we wouldn't remember all this.
We wouldn't, hopefully. Yes. So sorry about this. Okay.
It's fine.
So let's get started.
Good.
Okay, so we are going to be talking about understanding bereavement and grief from a griever and supporter's perspective. And what we're going to run through quickly is, in terms of the agenda, we're going to be looking at what is grief. We're going to be looking at the types of losses. We'll be looking at grief impacts, the cultural aspect of grief, strategies for supporting a griever, taking ownership of your healing journey, and how we can support you on your journey. A little bit about me. I know I've already been introduced, but sometimes it's always good to, give a bit of background so that you can see why I'm qualified to talk about this subject. So I wear several hats. I used to work as a business analyst many years ago, and then I transitioned to become a full-time productivity and leadership coach. I run an organization called Super Working Mom, where we help Christian mothers and women who are overwhelmed maximize their time so that they can manifest their big dreams. And then a few years ago, I founded the productivity company where we partner with both individuals and corporate organizations to enhance productivity by addressing the challenges of grief and change. And our focus really is to provide actionable strategies that help navigate the complexity of change and loss, empowering teams to regain their focus and thrive even during difficult times. Now, it's interesting, Dr. T mentioned that I was on the Kent radio show many years ago, and I was talking about, supporting women, helping them with their work-life harmony, like I like to call it. But then something happened 5 years ago that kind of changed the way I began to approach my work. My baby boy, my twin baby boy, Morakion Caleb, died unexpectedly 2 days before Christmas. So it's coming up to 6 years in December. And that was a very devastating loss for my family and I. And then 2 years later, COVID happened. And then my dad, who turned 70 in 2020, got a diagnosis, of brain tumor. And then exactly a year later, he died. Those two losses really impacted the way I saw life and the way I would interact with people and even the way I did my work. And so experiencing firsthand how unresolved grief significantly affected my productivity, both at home and at work, made me realize that there was something that needed to be done when it came to um, people's well-being, especially their emotional well-being when they go through loss. Because I suddenly became a shadow of myself. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't perform well in my work, in my business. I even took a part-time job because I couldn't focus on my business. But yet I was getting signed off sick by my GP. So it was a really, traumatic period in my life. And I looked ahead and I thought, if I continue down on this road, it's not going to be well. I need to take action. I just knew there and then, and maybe because I had the coaching background, I could just see that if I continued on that path, that I was not going to be useful to the society, my family, or even to myself. And so I embarked on a healing journey to address my unresolved grief. And then I discovered a renewed sense of purpose to life. And so this has now inspired the work I do now, which is to help others navigate their own losses, the changes that they experience in life, so that they can improve their emotional well-being in order to enhance their productivity and live more fulfilled lives. And so some of the ways that I'm doing this work is I got certified as a grief and loss specialist after, like I said, going through my own healing journey. And I help people on a personal level and a professional level. I also set up a CIC called My Little Warrior Child, where my team and I work specifically with bereaved parents. We take them on a weekend retreat to process their loss away from their everyday life. I also co-host a podcast called When Life Stops to discuss the subject of grief. So you can find that podcast anywhere, any podcast platform. And so whether you have experienced loss like I have, or you are here to support a griever, I hope you find today's session useful. Okay, so I want us to do a quick poll. I would like to know, I want to know who's in the room. If you've experienced bereavement at any point in your life, so that's loss of a loved one, please type 1 in the chat box. And if you're here to support someone who has experienced bereavement, please type 2. And if Dr. T can just help mention, because I'm managing so many things here, if you can help me just mention what the feedback is in the chat, that would be great. So if you've experienced bereavement, please type 1. If you're here to support someone who has experienced bereavement, please type 2. Oh, I can't hear anybody.
Quite a lot of one, but a couple of 2s.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, quite a lot of 1 actually. Yeah.
Quite a lot of 1s. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and then somebody 1 and 2, 1 and 2.
Okay. Yeah. That's so possible as well. That is definitely possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Quite
so
a lot
thank
of
you for
1,
that.
yeah. 1 and 2, 1 and 2, yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing that bit. So it's good to know that we have the right set of people in the room. Is my screen share? Am I still sharing my screen?
No, we can't see your
but
screen.
it's not very clear.
Oh, okay, it's not clear. So I don't know what has happened to my Zoom. This is the first time this is happening. So let me. It's not even allowing me to stop sharing, which is so annoying.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on.
Or
Okay, can you see it now?
I can see the screen.
yeah, just about.
Just about.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's partial.
It's partial, right? Oh, why is
Yeah.
this happening? Oh God. Okay.
Or
let's
do you
see. Can you stop sharing? Can you help me stop sharing? I don't know why I can't stop sharing my screen because I want to share.
Let me see. Or do you want me to? Will it work for you for me to share? If you send it to me and then I can share your screen. I can share your.
Some of us can
Yes.
see it quite clearly. I can see everything that you're sharing.
Oh, right.
Okay,
I'm not. I really don't know
And
what's
a few
happening.
people have said the same thing in the chat room.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. You go ahead then. Yeah.
Okay. I'm so sorry for those who can't see the screen. I don't know why it's behaving. This doesn't happen. Oh gosh. Okay, so let's go ahead then. So can you see what it says when the slide that says what is grief? Can we see that slide?
Yes, we can see that. Yeah.
Yes, we can see that.
Okay,
yes, we can.
Okay. Fantastic. Now I've lost my notes. Okay. Oh. Okay, so what is grief? Grief, I'll just stop again. Okay. So if you can see what is on the screen, we have about 1 to 3 definitions of grief. Grief is the human emotional response to significant loss. That is the first definition. The second definition is that it is normal, it is natural, and unique to an individual. And then lastly, grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. Now, I want you to pay attention to the highlighted words. Grief is the human emotional response to a significant loss. Now, you will notice that there is no reference to bereavement and there is no reference to death in any of these statements. And this is because grief is a set of emotions that is not just confined to bereavement. So I know we're going to be talking about bereavement a lot today, but I wanted to make that clear. Because when people hear the word grief, they tend to think of only when it's, when someone dies. And of course, it's a huge part, but there's a whole lot more when it comes to the subject of grief. Grief, like is written there, is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. So for example, if you think of an end of an abusive marriage, someone who went through that experience, on one hand, may feel relieved that they are no longer in the abusive environment. But on the other hand, they might feel sad that they are no longer married. So can you see there are two conflicting emotions there? So experiencing the entire range of both positive and negative feelings simultaneously is what often causes grieving people to feel overwhelmed. So let's talk about tangible and intangible losses. There are over 60 events that can evoke the emotion of grief. Some tangible, some intangible losses. Can be broken down into tangible and intangible losses. And some examples of tangible losses are death, which we are familiar with, a divorce or a separation, a friendship loss, legal problems, changing jobs, moving to a new country or a new home, loss of health, financial change, redundancy, your pet dying, Those are some examples of tangible losses. Some examples of intangible losses are loss of safety. During COVID, many people did not feel safe. So we all experienced that loss of safety. Some people have experienced loss of their childhood, that maybe daddy dies and suddenly you have to become the man of the house. Loss of trust in an organization, in the system, in parents, with relationships. That's also possible. Loss of your innocence. Think about sexual abuse in this instance. Loss of stability, loss of control, loss of fertility, and loss of dreams, hopes, and expectations. We also have what we call disenfranchised grief. And this is when your grief doesn't fit in with, the larger society's attitude about dealing with death and loss. And it is usually losses that can arise from what people don't consider big, if you see what I mean. So for example, someone who's gone through a miscarriage or stillbirth, job loss or career change, the loss of your identity and purpose tied to a job can be deeply felt by you, but other people might look at you and say, oh, get over it, you should be fine. A divorce or even a relationship breakup, loss of a pet, illness or disability, the loss of your health and independence can be a profound source of grief. We also have stigmatized losses such as abortion and suicide. These losses, while they're significant, may not be publicly mourned or even recognized, leaving the individual feeling isolated and misunderstood. And I say all of this to say that it is crucial for us to remember that every loss is valid, every grief is valid. And by seeking support and by being, by empathizing with others, we can help them on their healing journey. Let's go to the next slide. Now, I know that we have, some very esteemed psychiatrists in the audience today, and these are, you're experts in the field of mental health. And so while grief and clinical depression may seem very similar, it's important to understand their distinct nature. Grief is often emotional based. It is an emotional, intense response to loss, and it is natural. It's a complex journey, but it is not necessarily a clinical disorder. And I'm hoping that the psychiatrists in the house would agree with me. Now, interestingly, many mental health professionals that we work with as, we grief specialists work a lot with mental health professionals. They have observed that underlying resolved grief is often a common factor among their clients, even when they present with different symptoms. Therefore, a collaborative approach between grief specialists and mental health professionals is very crucial, because if we can work together, we can provide a comprehensive support to individuals navigating the complexity of grief and mental health. Okay, so now I want us to do another quick poll. Now that we know the definition of grief, and I've shared some examples of tangible and intangible losses, and that grief isn't just about bereavement, I want us to type in the chat. Type 1 if you have experienced any of the emotional losses that I mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention it, but you can already identify from the definition of grief that this can fall under an emotional loss. So type 1 if you've experienced any of those losses, whether tangible or intangible, and type 2 if you haven't. And if you are open enough to share what the emotional loss is, feel free to type in the chat, or if not, it's fine, including bereavement. So if it's a bereavement, feel free to type that I've gone through a bereavement, the loss of my dad, the loss of, in my own case, I've gone through the loss of my dad, I've gone through the loss of my son. I once went through should I call it a redundancy? I was laid off work. So I went through that, but funny enough, at the time, I didn't realize it was a loss. I just thought it was, yeah, I got laid off work and I went through all those emotions. But obviously with the number of studies I've done and the experience I have now, I can now identify that was a loss. So let's see in the chat. Okay. So, okay. Thank you. One. Okay, thank you for sharing. Several immediate family members. Wow, thank you. Okay, if you can go back to the slide on tangible and intangible losses so people can see that as well. Okay. Okay, so it's not written. So I've said things like, relationships, moving from one country to another, changing jobs, redundancy, those type of things, loss of safety, loss of your health, loss of your innocence. Those are losses, intangible losses. Okay, thank you all for sharing your experience with loss. And of course, while I've highlighted various type of losses, today we are concentrating a lot more on bereavement. However, the tips and insights that I'll be sharing today can certainly be useful for navigating any kind of loss. So let's move on to the next slide that says grief is individual and unique. Okay, yeah, the slide. Thank you. Now, this slide is mainly for everyone, but also to those who are here to support someone who's grieving, and also for yourself if you're grieving. We need to understand that grief is individual and unique to the individual. And I want to stress on this point so that we are not comparing or minimizing another person's loss. Because what happens when we compare our grief or our loss to someone else's is that we are automatically robbing them from the dignity of their loss. And we are basically telling them that their loss is invalid for whatever reason. This is also for grievers who may have experienced more than one loss. We need to be careful not to compare your losses as it might impact your recovery. The loss of a parent may present a very different set of emotions to the loss of a child, or to moving, or to a new job. Yes, you're going to experience, the intensity of grief, but it would vary. Okay. So if I use myself as an example, when Morakion died nearly over 5 years ago, I felt a huge sense of loss, pain, hopelessness, disappointment, anger, and despair. I felt I was at my rock bottom. I had this stabbing pain in my chest. I couldn't breathe properly. I was anxious. I was always on the edge. Now, my dad passed away 2 years after my baby died, but I felt very different. I was very sad because he had only just turned 71 when he passed. But I was at peace because I knew that my dad lived a very fulfilled life. And also, it's possible that because I'd gone through the healing journey once and I knew how to resolve my grief, it helped me process my dad's loss faster. But the emotions that I felt were totally different. In fact, my grandmother passed on, was it last year or 2 years ago? And again, completely different sets of emotions. She lived well to over 100 years old. And so it was almost like a celebration of life that, wow, Mama lived well. So it was so different from how I felt when my son died and when my father died. Why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because if you're grieving right now, or maybe you've gone through different type of losses, don't compare how how the emotions you went through that you're going through now with a previous loss. Because it might confuse, you might get worked up and go, why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't feel this way. No, there is no right or wrong way to feel when you're grieving. And again, this is because no relationship is the same. The relationship I had with my dad was very different from the relationship I had with my son, and very different from the relationship I had with my grandma. So the way I grieved those losses were very different and very unique. And also, contrary to popular belief, the 5 stages of grief, you've probably heard of the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Those 5 stages are often misinterpreted as a linear process. In fact, Elizabeth Cooper-Ross, who introduced these stages, emphasized that they are not necessarily sequential or experienced by everyone. And her work was focused on dying and getting a diagnosis that you are going to die, rather than on the grief process itself. And so there is no right or wrong way to grieve. It's not a linear process. Instead of us focusing on stages, we should acknowledge that grief is a fluid experience, fluid and multifaceted experience. And so for supporters in the house, don't hurry your friend, don't hurry your sibling, your relative, your colleague on their grieving journey and ask them, what stage are you at? There are no stages, okay? Let's not put people in a box or a stage and expect that they should have snapped out of it, 1 year later, 5 years later, or whatever time frame you have in your mind. We need to be empathetic towards each other and be mindful that everyone grieves differently. Next slide, please. Now, grief can manifest in various ways. While we've said that grief is unique and individual, there are some impacts, and we need to understand what happens on our inside when we experience grief. And so some very common symptoms across board could be emotional, feeling of sadness, of depression, anger and frustration, anxiety, worry, feelings of guilt and shame, or numbness and detachment. There is also a physical impact on our bodies when we grieve. Dr. T mentioned the tripartite, helping people with spirit, soul, and body. It's all connected. So whatever you're feeling emotionally, if it's not, it will always look for an expression in your body. So a lot of grievers would say that they've experienced fatigue, they feel tired, some can't sleep or they are sleeping too much. Some experience changes in their appetite, it's either a lot more or less. Physical aches and pains in their bodies, ulcers, headaches, neck pain, back pain, and a weakened immune system. That is the impact of grief. Also, grievers might find that they have difficulty concentrating. They might have temporary memory losses. They might feel confused and disoriented, and they find that they are indecisive. And I don't know if you've heard this before, people, professionals will say, don't make a major decision the first year of a major loss, because your brain, your mind is going through a lot, and you might end up making the wrong decision in that moment. Also, there are behavioral impacts. You might find that you're socially withdrawn, you don't want to talk to anybody, you don't want to see anybody. You might find yourself using substances, drugs, alcohol, and you might just find maybe a change in your daily routine because of the impact of grief. It's important to remember that these symptoms can vary in intensity and will differ for each individual. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And on this next slide, we are looking at the cultural consideration for grief. Now, I know that many, I don't want to assume that we are all from, I know that many of us here are from, we're I'm looking for the politically correct word to use, but many of us here are Black, right? And maybe from African backgrounds. But I wanted us to talk a bit about the cultural considerations for grief. We've already established that grief is unique and individual. It is a universal human experience. However, it can manifest differently across different cultures. Every culture has their cultural norm, their traditions, their beliefs, which shape how individuals grieve and how their grief is understood and supported by their community. So what are some examples of cultural consideration that can influence grief? The expression of grief is one. Some cultures encourage open display of emotions, while others tell you to hide away and don't show anyone. You have to be strong. You shouldn't let anyone know that you are in pain. So some cultures lean towards that, while some would encourage open displays of emotion. The Western culture's grief approach is, open. Tears, verbal expression of sorrow, and sharing memories during funerals are common. While Eastern cultures may value more restrained expression of grief, especially for men, you're told not to cry. Big men don't cry, right? Or men don't cry. And then you're told, no, you have to be strong for your wife or your children or for your parents and all of those things. I'm sure we've heard these things. Funerals in Black communities are often viewed as celebration of life, especially when it's an older, like older person, like my grandma who was over 100 when she died. It was a celebration of life. While there'll be a lot of dancing, music, and owambe, kind of thing, wearing uniforms or ashrebi for the Yorubas in the house. So you wear the same attire and everyone's, rejoicing and celebrating. But deep down, there is still that pain there that, this person has died. There's also the role of faith. Faith and spirituality in many cultures, which is often central to the grieving process, provides comfort and hope for people. Then we have social support. Again, the social support varies across cultures. In Black communities, Black cultures, we would have the extended families coming over, we would have the church community coming over to rally around the bereaved family, offering support and comfort. But after the funeral, no one's there, no one's there to be found. Then also time frame for grief. Some cultures may have specific timelines for mournings. You might hear things like, oh, a widow has to wear black for the next 1 year. She must not go out. We have so many different cultural beliefs. While other cultures may view grief as a lifelong process where they often have ongoing remembrance and the connection to the disease. Now, understanding these cultural differences is essential in providing cultural sensitivity support to grievers. While some cultural traditions can provide comfort and support during time of loss, it's important to also acknowledge that some practices may cause further pain. For instance, in certain Nigerian cultures, and I'm sharing this maybe because I was a little bit impacted by this, but thank God that I'm based in the UK. Parents are not allowed to participate in the burial of their child or even know the location of the burial site. Now, such practices obviously are rooted in tradition where, the parent is meant to die before the child. But it can further increase the grief of parents and hinder their healing process when they don't know where their child has been buried. And I remember, I can say this now. I remember when my son died, my dad called from Nigeria. It's like, oh, you let your brother go represent you. You shouldn't know where your son is being buried. And I was like, Dad, we're in the UK. This is not Nigeria. Respectfully, I am going to bury my son. So that's why I said I was slightly impacted. But I don't know. I'm trying to imagine a mother who is based in Nigeria and does not know where her child is buried. I can't even imagine it. So it's essential for us to, as a culture now, I'm talking to us as a culture, we need to evaluate some of these practices and consider the impact on the grieving individual. So obviously, cultural traditions are important, but they should not be prioritized over the emotional well-being of the deceased. We need to approach cultural practices with sensitivity and understanding and recognizing that all traditions are, that not all traditions are universally beneficial. We need open dialogue and willingness to adapt to changes that can help a griever heal, from their loss. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, so now we're moving nicely into how to support someone who is grieving. I've been building this up for us to, first of all, understand what grief is, the different type of losses. Grief is unique. Grief is individual to the griever. And it is important to note that the impact of our words and actions can create lasting impressions on a griever. A griever is already heightened, they're already sensitive. So saying the wrong thing to a griever can, again, because their senses are already heightened, it makes things worse for them. not only are they dealing with the loss of their loved one or whatever loss they've gone through, they now have to deal with the impact of careless words that have been spoken to them. So what are some of the things we should not say to a griever? So I'm starting with things not to say. And again, I'll be sharing some links at the end where some of these things, you can get them in a PDF so that you can read them and use that to empower yourself. Because what tends to happen is, because many people don't know what to say when someone has gone through a bereavement, they avoid the griever, and that just makes things worse. Suddenly the griever is isolated, and they feel like no one understands them. So what are some of the things not to say to a griever? Anything that minimizes their pain. So saying something like, "Oh, don't worry, you'll soon get over it," or "time heals all wounds," or maybe in the case of a relationship breakdown or divorce, "Oh, but there are other fishes in the ocean. You find someone else." Or this one that we say a lot for those who are religious or who are Christians, "Oh, they're in a better place." Now, they may be in a better place, but that is not what the griever needs to hear at that time. Many of the things we say can sound intellectually sound, but emotionally useless to a griever. Don't offer unsolicited advice. Refrain from telling a griever how to grieve or what they should be doing. "Oh, you should do this now. Oh, you should be doing that." No, refrain from unsolicited advice. Also, refrain from comparing their loss to your own loss or someone else's. Avoid, because what this does is you minimize their experience when you compare the loss. I'll never forget when my son died. Someone came to visit us and it was going all well. They were saying all the right things. I wasn't listening. And then as they were leaving, they were like, "Well, if it's any consolation, my uncle, son, who just got admission to Harvard or somewhere, I don't even know where it was, they had paid the school fees, something, and he died. At least your child was a baby. You hadn't invested so much in him." Oh, I felt like punching this person. Like, how dare you compare the loss of my child to someone else's? I don't know who your uncle is. I mean, I get it. That loss happened. But comparing losses, what you're basically doing is you're minimizing that person's loss. You're saying, "Don't feel bad," right? "Don't feel bad. He was a baby. You hadn't invested so much in him." Others, "Oh, the 20-year-old or the 15-year-old, they had invested so much." Comparing losses is a no-no. It is a no-no. Don't push any griever to move on too quickly and say, "Are you still crying? You should be over it by now." No, we shouldn't. We should also, this is one thing that a lot of religious people do. We say, "It is well." Now, it may be well, right, in the grand scheme of things, but in that moment, to the griever, it is not well. Their loved one is not here. They want their loved one here, but their loved one isn't. And so, of course, I know we have some Christians in the building and maybe other religious people, and we turn to our faith for comfort during the times of our grief. However, we must be mindful of how we offer spiritual support. Well-intended phrases like "it is well," "God has a plan," or "God needed them in heaven," "they're in a better place," can sometimes feel dismissive or insensitive to your fellow Christians or the same religious beliefs, and to people who don't even share the same faith with you. So we need to be really mindful of the things we say. Instead, we should focus on offering empathy, understanding, and practical support. Listen attentively, validate their feelings, and offer your presence. Now, what are some things that you can say? While I share this, feel free to type some of the things you heard that were not helpful in your time of loss. And again, it's to learn this, this is an education session. It's to learn from each other what we've heard that wasn't helpful. What are some of the things that we can say that are helpful? First, we should acknowledge that person's loss. "I am sorry for your loss." Okay? Express empathy. "I can't imagine what you're going through." And we truly can't. Again, it goes back to us not comparing our losses. So imagine that because my dad passed away, and then I'm trying to console someone whose dad has also passed away. I should not be saying, oh, I know how you feel. My dad passed away, because I don't. The relationship they had with their dad is very different from the relationship I had with my dad. So I mustn't be saying things like, oh, I know how you feel. I've been there. Don't worry, you'll be fine. The best you can say at this point is, I can't imagine what you're going through. Offer practical help. Can I bring you dinner? Can I bring you food? What would you like to talk, or just sit? I'm here to just sit with you and listen. Like I said, validate their feelings. When a griever is in tears, or and they're trying to apologize, tell them not to apologize. Tell them it's okay to feel sad, or whatever emotion they're feeling. It's okay to feel angry or confused. If you know the person who passed away, share your memories of that person, or, maybe a positive quality or a funny story. Again, read the room to see if that's the right time to share, right? But if you knew the person, and, you have fond memories of the person, fond memories, share that. And then check in regularly. How are you doing? Send text messages. Grievers might not always want to talk, and so you have to follow their lead. Okay? Follow their lead, listen attentively, listen with your heart and not with your head. Avoid interrupting. Don't analyze, don't judge, don't compare, don't criticize. It's a good thing this is recorded, so because I'm trying to, move a bit fast, but we can always watch the replay to get some of this. And like I said, we'll share a link to get a PDF with some of these key ways to support someone who's grieving. So feel free to also type in the chat what people did that you found helpful in your time of loss. Okay. Now I want to end this slide with saying, respect a griever's space, but don't avoid them, right? Follow their lead. They might need some alone time, right? Or a quiet space to collect their thoughts for when they've gone through a loss. So respect the need for privacy, but also check in on them. If a griever doesn't reply your text, don't get offended. Just check in. I can clearly remember lots of people who would send me a text maybe every week or every other day to just check up on me. I wouldn't necessarily reply because I wasn't in the right frame of mind. But now I look back and I'm so grateful for those times where they'll just send me just checking on you, praying for you, I'm here if you need me. Yeah, so those are some of the things that we can do to help. So again, going back to the powers of our words, we need to understand that our words might have lasting impact on a griever. So we must be ready to offer compassion. We must be ready to offer a space for them to share as much or as little as they want. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, now this is for anyone who's grieving. Taking ownership of your healing journey is a very powerful step towards your recovery and growth. And so here are some strategies to help you navigate the process. But before I go into the strategies, I wanted to talk about that statement. Time doesn't heal wounds. It is the action you take that would help. Time doesn't heal wounds. I've had a number of clients who experienced a loss 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and they feel the exact way that they felt those many years ago because for some reason they were lied to that time will heal their wounds, but time did nothing. All time did was pass. It is the actions we take that would help. Imagine if you had a flat tire and you took a stool and sat down and said, time will fix this tire. I'll just wait and, see this tire come back, come back to its state, to come back to life, basically. That tire is not going to fix itself. You need to either call a mechanic or the AA, or if you know how to pump air into the tire, you do it yourself. So it is the action steps that we take. So what are some of the actions that we can take? The first action is to acknowledge your feelings. Give yourself permission to feel your emotions. Whether it is sadness, anger, confusion, guilt, whatever it is, name that emotion. Because suppressing your feelings would only hinder your healing process. So acknowledge your feelings, label what you're feeling, okay? The next thing you want to do is to practice self-care. You want to take care of yourself as much as you can, and you want to allow others to take care of you. And so this might involve nourishing your mind, your body and soul, and your spirit. It might include exercising, but not exercising to cover up pain, but exercise to just make sure that you're moving. Try and eat healthy as much as you can. Spend time in nature. Stay away from anyone who is making you either feel agitated or guilty, or they say things that are not helpful. Stay away from them. And that leads me to the third point: build a supportive network. Surround yourself with supportive friends and family who understand and can offer comfort and encouragement. Stay away from anyone who makes you feel worse. Join grief support groups that can provide valuable connections and resources. Also, practice mindfulness, and this is when you focus on the present. As a griever, it's very easy to focus on the past and very easy to try and focus on the future that you would never have. So we need to focus on the present, because dwelling on the past or worrying about the future is not going to help you. So whether it's things like meditation, deep breathing, prayer, journaling, that can help you stay in the moment. Another step is you need to challenge negative thoughts. Oh, your negative thoughts are going to be heightened in your time of grief. There is so many things that will be coming to your mind, but it would only hinder your healing process. So try and replace negative thoughts with positive affirmations, and focus on your strengths and building resilience. We need to change the thoughts that are coming to our mind as much as you can. And if you can't find a trusted friend or someone that you trust not to analyze, judge you, and share those thoughts with them, someone that can help you challenge those negative thoughts. Then embrace your grief journey. Now, remember that grief is not linear, and your healing process is also not linear. There may be setbacks on the way, but it's important to be patient with yourself. You might find that today you're full of energy and then tomorrow you're down. Just take it, as it comes, and embrace the new journey that you're on, because it is a new journey. Then as you begin to walk through that healing process, you need to explore, find meaning and purpose to this new life that you now have. Volunteer, try new hobbies, look for creative outlets as part of your healing process. And of course, celebrate your progress. Acknowledge your achievements, no matter how small, and reward yourself for your hard work and dedication. Okay? And lastly, I have here, seek professional help. A therapist or a grief specialist can help provide guidance and tools to help you process your emotions and develop healthy coping mechanisms. And so I want to touch on this point: seeking professional help. There is no shame in seeking professional help. So let's do another quick poll, another quick exercise. And again, this is not an exercise to judge you, but just to have an idea to see, for anyone who's gone through any type, maybe bereavement or loss, have you sought professional help to cope with your unresolved grief? Type 1 if yes, type 2 if no, or 3 not yet, still thinking about it, still trying to find the right grief support. So 1 is yes, I've sought professional help. 2 is no, I haven't. 3 is thinking about it. So let me know in the chat. Okay, fantastic. We have some 1s. We have 3. Anyone else? I hope this is making sense. 2, okay, thank you, Helen. Okay, I can see 1s, I can see 2s. I can see 2s. Okay, thank you for sharing. We can move to the next slide now. Yes, and so this is where I've said that there is no shame in seeking professional help. Now, access to adequate support can vary, can vary significantly across different communities. And research has shown that people in the Black community, and particularly those from maybe marginalized communities, often face unique challenges in accessing grief support services. And some of the contributing factors to that is cultural stigma. In a lot of Black cultures, we are you openly expressing your grief sometimes may be discouraged or seen as a sign of weakness or failure. And so there's this stigma associated with seeking grief support, and they believe that help is not needed because time will heal your pain. And what this leads to is individuals bottling up their emotions and avoiding seeking help. And if you also think about the traditional gender roles and expectations, it can influence men, particularly seeking professional help. We all know that men and women express grief differently. And again, that's a whole topic we've not even looked at today. But in most cultures, women may feel more socially acceptable to express their emotions and go out to seek support, while men may be pressured to suppress their feelings and appear strong. And so that's why there's a lot of, I'm sure Dr. T can back me up with research here. There are a lot of men that are going through, whether it's mental health issues, other kinds of issues because they've not dealt with their grief. There's also the historic trauma of, systematic racism, discrimination, which can worsen the impact of accessing grief resources. And then we could have things like lack of culturally or faith competent services. Many grief support services may not be culturally sensitive or may not adequately address the specific needs of Black individuals and communities where faith and culture are very, key for us. Also, we have things like financial barrier. Limited access to affordable grief support can prevent Black individuals from seeking the support they need. And that is part of why I am deeply passionate about supporting individuals who have experienced loss, especially in our community. And personally, for me, I'm a Christian, but I work with anyone, but I tend to incorporate that as well, right? Not now, if I'm working with a Christian, yes, we'll talk about faith and all, but if I'm not, I can still in the background use some of, my values to work with grievers, to empower them to take an active role in their healing journey and take the right action steps to resolve their pain. I want to encourage anyone who hasn't yet sought out professional help or who is still thinking about it to not try to do the grief journey alone. It's already isolating enough. And this is where professional help can come in to help. As a grief specialist, I work with people to process their losses and help them communicate in a safe manner all their undelivered communication of an emotional nature, because that's really what grief is. It's things that you wish you could have said, done differently, or maybe things you wish you had not said, or things you wish you had said to your loved one before they died. And this is where the grief resolution program comes in, which I'll just share very quickly for anyone who may be looking for additional help. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so the grief resolution program, the edutherapy program, is what I use to support my clients, and it's what I went through to help me with my own loss journey. Now, what we offer is in traditional counseling. I tried traditional counseling, but it did not work for me because, and again, it might work for some people, but it didn't work for me because all I did was talk about my pain. I wasn't necessarily given the tools to resolve the pain. I just kept talking about it. So every week I'll talk about the pain that I was experiencing, but I didn't feel like I was going anywhere. But with the grief resolution program, we take you through a step-by-step action-based program over a period of 8 weeks. So it has a start date and an end date. And it allows you, what it does, it allows you to resolve what is unresolved for you. And we offer a specialized approach designed to help individuals navigate the complexity of grief and loss. So you get to process your emotions, even the ones that you have buried or suppressed. It helps you it provides the concrete steps to healing. You get to challenge your negative thought patterns. You get to develop healthy coping strategies. You get to feel empowered and resilient, such that if you go through another loss, you already have the tools to help you navigate that loss. You also get to find meaning and purpose after that loss to your life. And so you can scan that code, and we'll put up the links as well. And there's for when our next program is starting in January, for anyone who's interested in that. We have a few partly funded spaces, and also one-to-one sessions are available as well. The next slide. And I think this is my last slide so that we can move on to questions. So I wanted to end with this quote. You have the ability to heal from emotional loss and discover new meaning in life after experiencing a loss. And I wanted to share this because many people that I've come across, clients, potential clients, most times will always say to me, they can never recover from a loss. And I thought the same. When my son died, I thought I could never, ever recover from that loss. But I want to say to you today that you can. You have that ability to heal from emotional pain, emotional loss. Now, pain and sadness are not the same thing. Okay? So while sadness is a normal and healthy emotion, pain indicates that there are unresolved issues, and it can become an obstacle to you living your life to the fullest. And by understanding the difference and seeking support, you can transform your grief into a source of strength and resilience. All the period when, the early days when my son passed away, before when I embarked on a healing journey, I was in so much pain. I was in pain physically, I was in pain emotionally, I was in pain mentally, I was in pain. Everything about me was just pain, pain, pain. I remember my GP wanted to put me, and I was depressed. My GP wanted to put me on antidepressants, but I didn't want to, because I have 3 other children, and I didn't know the impact it would have on me. Again, nothing against antidepressants. I had so much back and neck pain. I was given these strong painkillers, and then I had to take another drug because they said the painkillers could cause ulcers. So I was taking ulcer. It was just a mess. I was in a complete mess. But after I went through the healing process, which I now take my clients through, the pain disappeared. And that's because I'd resolved what was unresolved for me. Now, that doesn't mean that from time to time I don't feel sad that my son isn't here. I wish he was here, but I'm not. Sadness, like I said, sadness and pain are 2 different things. I'm no longer in pain. But then there are times when I would just cry, I would miss him and his siblings when we talk about him. That's normal. But pain shows that there might be something unresolved. So to wrap up, I want you to know that grief doesn't also mean forgetting. And that's another worry that when people come to me, they worry that if they resolve their grief, they are going to forget their loved one. But the truth is, you can never forget your loved one. Remembering your loved one is a testament to the depth of your love. And so we often fear that forgetting equates moving on, or healing means moving on and forgetting your loved one. But that's not true. You're still going to hold on to the memories. You still get to share stories without the pain, and you still get to celebrate the life of your loved ones by keeping their spirit alive within you. So thank you for listening.